You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported.
Hey Greg, I have a movie pitch for you.
Oh, shoot.
I want to do a loose adaptation of some of the works of Isaac Asimov.
Oh, cool. So it'd be like a contemplative look at the possibilities of artificial intelligence?
No, I said loosely. Will Smith is just going to smash a bunch of robots.
I have some notes.
Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast where we obey 3 strict rules. Rule number 1, I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
Rule number 2, I'm your host, Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm your third rule, Greg Beaver.
And we are here today to talk about the film I, Robot. And we are joined by a guest. It's my pleasure to introduce a friend of the show and co-editor of the unofficial Hugo Book Club blog, which was shortlisted for a Hugo Award for Best Fanzine. Please welcome Olav Rokne.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I should say, too, you and your co-editor were award.
Yeah.
The award is for both of you.
Yeah, Amanda and I were shortlisted.
Very cool. And welcome back. We haven't had you on since, I think it was Dark Phoenix, right?
Dark Phoenix, yes. And I'm really glad you keep inviting me on to talk about such high-quality, thoughtful, nuanced pieces of cinema.
Yeah, we got a bona fide X-Men expert to talk about the stupidest X-Men movie, and we got you're a Hugo Award nerd, as it were, fan, and we got you to talk Asimov, or at least what little, just like you've seen those memes going around of like the sparkling water that tastes like it's water that tastes like it was next to a lime. It's the idea of strawberry. This is like Isaac Asimov adjacent.
So here's an interesting thing about this. Isaac Asimov didn't come up with the title I, Robot. He stole that title from a previous short story by somebody named Iando Binder, which was about robot uprising, much like this movie. And he actually didn't want to call his book I, Robot, but the publisher sort of insisted on it. So there's a certain irony that this movie used that title.
Wild, yeah, and that's this is kind of nuggets you're here for, because that's gonna be a heck of a lot interesting than this movie. But we'll have lots of time to dunk on this. What have you all been watching lately? What's on your movie plate? Cut that part out.
Amanda and I just watched a documentary called The Sparks Brothers, which is about the band Sparks, and it's so good. And one thing that wasn't in that documentary is the fact that Sparks recorded the theme song to a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie called Knockoff. And I cannot recommend Knockoff. It is a terrible, terrible, mediocre Jean-Claude Van Damme, paint-by-numbers action flick. But the Sparks theme song over the end credits is completely bizarre, and it's so bizarre to have that as the theme song to a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that it's actually just worth watching the end credits.
Nice. I'm more excited to hear about that Sparks movie because I love Edgar Wright.
It's so good.
It seems to me like we often, after the show is over, we just kind of sit around and shoot the shit about movies for a little bit. And it seems to me that we had talked about that Sparks documentary. I remember watching the trailer after, so I know that Liam is jazzed for it. So that's pretty cool.
I'm embarrassed. When that trailer dropped, I'm a little embarrassed to say I'm not like a huge music nerd, but I have truly never heard of the Sparks. That when I was watching that trailer, I'm like, is Edgar Wright doing like a Spinal Tap thing? Like, how is this band this influential and famous, and I've never heard of them? And I'm like, I'm just an idiot who doesn't know everything. I should not.
Well, it definitely expanded my knowledge of their career, because I just had sort of this vague notion that this band existed. They'd recorded a couple of interesting songs I was aware of, but then it's like this 40-year like journey through just bizarre, crazy creativity. So
nice,
top-notch movie.
Fabulous. Yeah, I recently watched Train to Busan, which I also would recommend. That movie,
good.
I came out of that one just being mad bad movies exist, because it's just so technically tight and it's just good. There's no meat, fat on it. It's tightly edited. Setups are paid off. It's like a clinic. It's like a clinic on filmmaking that it makes me furious bad movies exist.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the joy of watching a terrible movie and just kind of chewing on it and relishing it and dunking on it. But there's also something to be said about seeing a movie that's so good that it makes you angry at other movies. Where it's just like, and it's so good sometimes that you're angry at that movie for being so good. And you're just like, oh, how can a movie this good exist?
Yeah, it's not even that it's so good, it's that it's just not bad. Like, there's no bad parts. There's no notes. It's just like a pretty good movie. Sorry.
I feel a sense of relief often when I watch a good movie, because we watch so many mediocres that it's just like drifting off into like a nice beautiful sleep or something like that, Yeah, Train to Busan, like you say, it's like really tight, but I also recall that the pace is very good. Like, it's just like quick. There's not a lot of lulls or anything like that. You're just going from action beat to action beat, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly what I'm referring to. It just like it's not breakneck. The pace is good. The storytelling's good. Everything about it's just like it's a clinic on how to make a tight movie. So
if you haven't seen it, the log line on it is a zombie outbreak on a train.
Yeah, zombies on a train.
Yeah, it's a perfect movie like Zack Snyder's Justice League. No fat.
Hot take.
Very, very trimmed down, perfectly paced, doesn't waste your time, gets straight to the point.
I feel like Olav's been sitting on that one since our Justice League episode. Well, I went back and saw a classic film. I've been trying to catch up on a bunch of movies that I have really no excuse for having not seen before, and this week I managed to knock Network off my list. Wow, that is a very good film, and I have no excuse for having never seen it before. If you have not seen Network, it is a very funny, deeply cynical movie, and it is definitely worth your time, and I would recommend seeking it out. Basically, it's a movie about television and the damage it does to people and how exploitative it is, and also capitalism and how damaging and exploitative it is to a certain extent. Again, deeply cynical movie, very funny, well worth your time.
Like Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Exactly.
Sometimes, I don't know if you find this, but sometimes when I watch one of those old classic movies, especially when they've got like a scene like Network does that sort of lives outside the movie, like his rant outside the TV studio.
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Yeah,
exactly. I almost find that I need to watch the movie several times because my anticipation for that moment almost draws me out of the context of the movie, and like I'm not taking the movie in as a whole. I'm like, where's the thing that I know? I want to know where the thing that I know is. I'm kind of waiting for it, and it's sort of I'll have to pick up Network again because I think I've only seen it once, and that was my sort of experience with it.
That would make Planet of the Apes an exhausting watch.
I guess so. Yeah, it's just for 30, like 10 seconds
at the end. No less. Yeah.
The very end.
Yeah. The pace of that movie is also very slow to get to that point.
We should probably get around to more of the Planets of the Apes movies. We've only done one of them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that one was a good episode. That was actually a lot of fun talking about what was it? Which one was it?
Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Beneath, and yeah.
I love Beneath. Beneath is one of my faves.
It's so bizarre and wild, and yeah, it's a good time. I have not really been watching many movies this week, but I did watch the trailer to Star Trek Picard, and there's a lot of like conflict in Star Trek fan circles right now, kind of between people who like new Trek and people who don't like new Trek. So, a new Picard trailer means probably renewed arguments and such. Fans who dig like Star Trek Discovery and Picard are sort of like, they praise its interpersonal relationships and conflict and things that they criticize old Trek for not doing particularly well. Like old Trek's kind of stuffy. That's sort of like how that
Eugene Roddenberry famously said that in the future humans would move beyond interpersonal conflict, and that's why such things did not happen in Starfleet vessels. I'm kind of on the dislike side of the new Trek, like not for a lot of different reasons, but like a lot of the people who dislike a new Star Trek get criticized because they think they just focus on the fact that like, oh, it's more violent and has a lack of hopefulness and stuff like that, and you're not taking in the wholeness of the show. So I don't know, like both sides are kind of like right and wrong for various reasons, as with any fandom arguments. I think I personally would like be more willing to accept new Star Trek if it were written stronger. That's just my main beef with it. But Star Trek groups kind of often point out that generally Star Trek fans have never really liked new iterations of Star Trek. Like the TOS fans hated TNG when it first aired in 1987, right? And the TNG fans were not very pleased with DS9 when it first aired. So, the accusation being just like, yeah, they're stuffy and they're old guard fans and they can't accept new stuff. And I had a bit of an epiphany this week because I was thinking about it and I was like, well, old Star Trek fans were kind of like, fans of the original series were kind of right about Star Trek Next Generation when it first came out, because those first 2 seasons were awful, right? And like, if you watch the first 10 episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, you'd be sitting there thinking like, how on earth did this ever get renewed for a second season? It's absolute garbage. With the possible exception with the pilot, which I think is okay. So I guess like this is my point I'm getting at is just like my usual rant about like, don't impugn someone's integrity when you're talking about media online and tell them that like, you're just being, a negative Nelly or whatever. Like, people have, good reasons for liking things. That it takes the fun away of art when you sort of like make it personal. And, I prefer that people sort of just keep it about the art. So that's my little rant, and it's probably like a 50% chance I'll cut this.
So do you think maybe Star Trek is just like Saturday Night Live, where you just like the first ones you were introduced to?
Oh yeah, I think that's probably. I think that's where the attachment comes from, right? Yeah. Like it's hard to get over your first love, right? So there's a certain amount of that. You're always going to compare, the thing that you fell in love with first, whether it's the original Star Wars trilogy, Star Trek, or maybe you love the original Battlestar Galactica series and you hate the new one, or whatever.
No, you love both of them. You love original Galactica and Galactica 1980. Sorry, that was a pretty obscure joke, but
it took me. Yeah, I'm like,
I picked up on it.
Well, we're lots of sci-fi, and our episode is no different because we are, of course, doing I, Robot from the year of our Lord 2004, directed by Alex Proyas from Dark City and The Crow. Written by Jeff Vittner and a friend of the show, Akiva Goldsman, who did the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code. And tangentially got his name put on it as Isaac Asimov. Yeah.
That was my favorite part of the movie, was when it said, suggested by Isaac Asimov.
Oh, I didn't notice. I didn't catch that. That's super funny. Suggested.
What a weird way to phrase that.
Ode to Asimov.
And Asimov would have had issues with this movie. I think I can say that with relative confidence, because the laws of robotics, actually, they don't show up till the fourth or fifth of his robot stories, but they're implied in those first ones. And Robbie, which was the first published in 1939, was actually written as a direct rebuttal to all of the robot uprising stories. He was basically saying, no, they're going to do what they're programmed to do. They're not going to suddenly decide to overthrow their tyrannical masters.
Yeah.
Now, I can get into a whole rant about what this says about his opinion of labor rights and of labor unions, but I'm not going to. I just think it's really rich that this is the story they chose to tell.
Yeah, it is a choice, and we'll hit the trailer here in a second. But just on the off chance folks don't know and don't feel like IMDbing it, this flick stars Will Smith as Del Spooner, Bridget Moynahan, Bruce Greenwood, James Cromwell, and Alan Tudyk as the voice of Sonny the robot. But let's go to the trailer.
We designed them to be trusted with our homes, with our way of life, with our world. But did we design them to be trusted?
The rollout of USR's new generation of robot, the NS-5, was marred by the death of designer Alfred Lanning.
Identify. Murder's a new trick for a robot. Respond. I did not murder him! We're gonna miss the good old days.
What good old days?
When people were killed by other people.
My robots don't kill people.
That thing threw somebody out of a window. Is that registering with you?
A robot cannot harm a human being.
And you trust them if you want to.
We look to robots for protection. Imagine the loss of all that we've gained because of an irrational paranoia. There is no conspiracy. What this is one mistake.
Oh, hell no.
Detective Del Spooner feels like the only sane man in a world where society has enthusiastically adopted robotic technology he doesn't trust. When he is summoned to the scene of the grisly, quote, suicide, unquote, of his friend, a leading robotics engineer, his suspicions are all but confirmed. With the help of a reluctant psychologist and Sonny, a robot with big dreams, Spooner will uncover a conspiracy which seeks to awaken the ghost in the machine. Can he stop a revolution? Can he learn to see a robot as a people? And why is Shia LaBeouf even here?
Yeah, Olaf, can you hit us with some more of the history of this story, this Isaac Asimov story, before we go into whatever this movie is?
Okay. There's no Isaac Asimov story called I, Robot, first off. There's a collection of short stories, and I think it's about 14 short stories, bestseller in I think the first edition of the collection was published in the late 40s, and I think Gnome Press first published it. And the thing is, in all of these short stories, robots are guided by, not just guided by, but obligated and cannot do anything other than follow three laws of robotics, which get repeated a lot in this movie. It's the one thing from Asimov that seems to have made it into this movie. But the movie is about how the robots don't actually follow these rules. So in the stories, those rules are: a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And the third law is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And the actual genius of Asimov's stories is that they inevitably adhere to these laws. There are points where you think, oh, this robot has broken these laws, but the actions of the robots always turn out to be a result of how these laws have been applied or understood by the robot, and how those laws might have come into conflict. So, for example, a robot might be ordered to tell the truth, and it keeps lying, right? But it turns out that the truth would cause a human being to come to harm, and that's sort of the twist ending to the story. And he wrote dozens of these stories of varying quality. I quite like Runaround. Evidence is a really good little story. It's actually, you know what, I would say Evidence is the story I would pick to adapt to the screen for very specific reasons. And Susan Calvin is the one character who seems to show up in a lot of these stories, and her job is a essentially robot psychologist. She is the programmer and brains behind these robots, and so she a version of her character shows up in this movie because you couldn't do an Isaac Asimov robot movie without Susan Calvin. But it doesn't really seem like...
I get the feeling this isn't the same character.
No, not at all.
They do say she's a robot psychologist, which is...
And her name is Susan.
Yeah,
but then I feel like that's about where it all...
She's also, at least in the little preview of Asimov's book that I got this morning when I was listening to an audiobook, she's quite a bit older. She's in her 70s, I believe.
Yeah, well, in the prologue to that book, she's in her 70s talking about her long career. But there's stories of her throughout her years.
Sure, they jump through time, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this movie was a real action romp, lots of, so many blown up robots, and then some houses got ripped up. It's a good popcorn flick. I don't know about you guys. I had a lot of fun just turning my brain off and, just vegging out on the couch watching some big stupid action movie. Where's my pal Michael Bay?
Yeah. The movie is watchable. It's a pretty, you're correct in that it's a fairly brainless action movie. It definitely thinks it's maybe deeper and smarter than it is, but it's not bad, but I don't know that I would quantify it as good.
Yeah, I was being facetious.
No, I'm being serious. I'm giving my opinion on the movie.
Yeah.
I thought,
what it reminds me in terms of a quality is like Paycheck. Like it's genuinely quite stupid. If you haven't seen Paycheck, it's where Ben Affleck
collects a paycheck.
Yeah, Olav is shaking his head.
Paycheck is 10 times the movie this one is. Like,
you think so? Okay.
Oh yeah,
fair enough.
Oh yeah, Paycheck sets up a house of cards, and then you see it all topple, and every piece falls together. There's a plot, a narrative arc that isn't entirely predictable. This iRobot is a manila envelope. You look at one side of a manila envelope, you know what the end of the manila envelope looks like. It is predictable and boring and tasteless, like a manila envelope.
I would say that's accurate.
Talking about? The bad corporate guy turned out to be a bad corporate guy. It's a good twist.
And the performances are so bad in this. I think this, I disliked it when I saw it in the theater in 2004 and hadn't rewatched it until this week. And it's worse than I remember in every way, wow. And it's dated worse than I thought it would have.
Yeah, the performances is an interesting comment because Will Smith really, I usually like him in movies. That's why he's in every movie, because he's a easy to watch, likable actor who brings, at the very least, competency and charm to every role he does, if not something interesting and creative and cool. But in this, he's got this swagger, and every line is a cute little quip, a little smart ass little quip. And it's exhausting.
Yeah, he's very unlikable in this movie. And I feel like that was a decision regarding the character, but it made it very hard to empathize with Detective Spooner for like the entire first act and most of the second act, so that by the time the movie tries to add some depth to him and rehabilitate him, I'm like, I don't care, and it's too late. And that's saying something. Also, I want to point out, this is the second movie we've done on this podcast where Will Smith has been cast as black guy with prejudice, and I feel kind of weird and gross about that.
When did we do Bright?
That was before your time.
Ago, yeah.
Oh shit! I thought we hadn't done that. I thought you were talking about Wild Wild West. Shit, cut that joke. That joke doesn't make sense. Because in Wild Wild West, he's all like, "I don't trust anybody else," and yeah. But yeah, Bright. He's a
black cop with prejudice, and in this movie, he's a black cop with prejudice, and I'm not certain how I feel about that. I feel kind of gross about it, actually, and I don't know why Will Smith is like the go-to guy to play that character.
Probably because white people like him.
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't even like a dig. Like I honestly think he's one of the most marketable.
It's totally true, because there was someone was talking about this past week about how there needs to be more South Asian stars than just The Rock, right? Or in that sort of middle of the ocean. Sorry,
I don't have the answer for you, Greg. I don't know. I know the word you're looking for, and I don't have it either.
Yeah, like a specific islander. That's probably the word I'm looking for, right? Yeah. So they're just in general, like the group is underrepresented, and like you can't just throw The Rock and everything and be like done. And that's kind of how I feel about Will Smith in this era. It's just like
the millennium.
Yeah, it's like he's the big bankable black star, but like I can't think of too many others who had that kind of blockbuster clout at that time, right? So you're totally right. Yeah, it's just white people liked him, and so they put him in everything
as a proxy for white guilt and white prejudice. Against robots or orcs or whatever, concussions.
And that's not to say he doesn't deserve to be in everything.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, he's great.
Fine.
He's the best part of Suicide Squad.
Yeah, but he didn't deserve to be in this because it was a waste of Will Smith and a waste of Alan Tudyk, who I really like, but I didn't like him in this. Like, was there a single performance that worked for you guys?
Only in so much as the Bridget Monahan, who played Dr. Calvin, I'm excited to see Olav's reaction to this, but that character and how she played it reminded me of Huxley in Demolition Man. Of just that, like, what are you talking about? Everything's normal. This is how normal everyday stuff happens. You nut. Well, I'm going to help you reluctantly I tell you that you're being a weirdo.
I will buy that.
Her denialism was definitely
if she hadn't
similar to Huxley.
If she hadn't been called Susan Calvin, I think I would have liked her. I think you're right.
Her character was somewhat tainted by your knowledge of the character it's based on.
Yes.
Fair enough. And reasonable.
You know, if they wanted to tell this story of a robot uprising, there are plenty of really good robot uprising stories that they could have cribbed from, right? Like, it makes no sense to call this iRobot. If you guys ever read Magnus Robot Fighter, like, cast Will Smith as Magnus Robot Fighter, take the Jim Shooter era Steel Nation comic books, you've got a great movie right there. This is the wrong source material for what they were trying to do.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Is there anything about this movie that anybody liked?
Yeah, that's my next question. I spent 30 minutes just like shitting.
Because I did like a lot of the future aesthetic. I thought that they were hoving pretty close to a cyberpunk aesthetic that I dig. I didn't like the robots. Certainly the new generation robots I thought looked really cartoony, but the older generation robots looked really slick, and I liked the cars. I liked the sets. I thought that there was a lot of really good production design that went to the film.
I really enjoyed the camera movement. I get the impression this was probably one of the first like digital backlot movies where they're, so much of the background is clearly like green screen, whatever. But it really felt like whoever edited the camera of this movie learned for the first time that like if if most of the thing you're looking at is in 3D, the camera can do whatever it wants. It's not tethered to a guy on a pole. It's a tool just like all the other CGI tools. And there's a number of times where the camera just like whips around for no reason, goes like straight up, looks straight down at the ground, and then comes back down the other side. There's one point where Will Smith and the robot are spinning around a bar like a monkey bar, and the camera follows it. Like, I realize this is a podcast and they can see my video thing where I'm spinning my hand around in a circle, but like the camera literally goes in like a centrifugal loop following the characters, and like as cheesy as the climax is, the camera kind of like really gets the most out of the stupid set piece they set up, the like series of wires and bridges overhanging the big fall down to the bottom.
The big computer brain.
Yeah, the big computer brain. All very stupid, but the camera like lives in the space in a really cool way that I enjoyed. So
there's a scene where Will Smith, Detective Spooner, goes to the house of the murdered roboticist, and he somehow wakes up the big construction robot lurking outside that then tries to kill him in violation of the first law of robotics. And that action sequence almost worked for me, and I really did like that robot's design. I thought that was a good setup and a good, like, survival moment.
Well, I can't wait for the notes part, because that might have been my least favorite part.
I think the one scene that worked for me, and you guys were talking about Will Smith's performance, but I thought his explanation of what happened to him in the water, and the robot making the wrong choice and choosing to save him rather than the little girl who was drowning. I thought that worked really well. It was a nice, tight, short scene. I thought Will Smith played it really well, and it was one of the few points in the movie where I felt a little emotion, so that was kind of nice.
Yeah. It tied back nicely into the dreams. Like, he keeps having dreams of that moment, and Sonny the robot's also having dreams, so we've got a couple of dreamers on our hands.
It sets up his distaste for robots quite well. Like, it's up until that point, it feels like kind of just prejudice, but then there's a little bit more heft and weight behind it.
The problem is that the full reveal of that comes too late. I was talking to Anita about it, and she mentioned the reason why you see in the first Iron Man movie, the reason you see Tony Stark get attacked first, and then we rewind and see him being a jerk leading up to the attack, is so that you sympathize with him right away. There's a cut of the movie apparently that exists where it's chronological up to the attack, and if you watch that version of the movie, he's very unsympathetic, and you don't care that he gets attacked at the beginning of that movie, because you're like, he's a jerk and he deserved it. I feel like if maybe, and this might be tiptoeing into changes, but I feel like if you had shown that scene first, and then we immediately are established this is why he doesn't like robots, it makes his subsequent jerkiness during the first act of the movie more sympathetic, as opposed to just coming across as aloof jerkiness to everybody he encounters. And an inexplicable prejudice against robots, which doesn't seem to make sense, because everyone else in the world is like, this is dumb, you're dumb. And again, when I watched the movie, I found him very unlikable for too much of the movie for me to care about him in the end. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah, you are tiptoeing into this. You fixed one of my notes.
Oh, sorry. Again, I was worried I was tiptoeing into fixes.
No, it's great. It's great.
I feel like one of the problems with that, Scott, might be that the three laws are fairly important to understand that particular moment in the film. So without having experienced the world a bunch and understanding more about what the robots are all about and what they are and aren't capable of, I'm not sure that seeing it right off the hop will work.
I disagree kind of, because I think that there could be a lingering question of why did the robot choose him that is then explained later on in the film. But the fact that he was saved and not the girl initially we see that, we understand why he doesn't like robots. And then we learn later on what the robot's logic was. And we can disagree or agree with it at that juncture. But I think you can still have that reveal later on while still showing the drowning scene at the beginning.
And the drowning...
Like the lying robot Olav mentioned at the top.
Yeah, well, that robot in the drowning scene was actually following the laws of robotics, and it made sense. Most of the rest of the movie basically says, oh, those laws are out the window, we don't care about those laws, so why did you introduce the laws to begin with, right? It's like, the whole genius of Asimov is not just in the robot stories, but in his Foundation novels, all over the place. He starts by setting up laws, and then things happen that you think don't work within those laws, but then it's slowly pieced together that, oh, yes, these laws were being followed all along, and here's why, and it all fits together logically. And this movie misses out that third part.
Yeah.
Well, then let's go get into the changes in our notes then.
Hi there, I'm Brendan, a certified home inspector with Roomy. Do you have a problem that needs fixing? Whether it's big or small, inside or outside, let me help you find out what's really going on. You can call me by phone, or we can take a look together over video chat. Visit roomy.ca, that's RUMI.ca, and go to Ask a Home Inspector to book your appointment with me today.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Bonkink.
I'm Andrew Paul.
And we're the hosts of the Well Endowed Podcast.
The Well Endowed Podcast is produced by Edmonton Community Foundation, or ECF as we call it.
ECF provides grants to charities through the endowment funds we create and manage with our donors.
Hence the title of our show, The Well Endowed Podcast.
Every month, we bring you a collection of stories and interviews with fascinating guests who are working to make Edmonton a strong, vibrant city to live in.
Through these stories, we look at the space where endowments intersect with your communities.
So if you're interested in the people and issues impacting your community, check out thewellendowedpodcast.com.
Welcome back to I Have Some Notes. We're talking iRobot. Guys, how are we going to make this better?
Okay. I'm gonna start the ball rolling here. The movie is called iRobot. The main character is not a robot. And I think that that's wrong. But this, to
There's
be fair,
Kane in Citizen Kane.
This ties back into my issue with Detective Spooner being very unsympathetic. I don't think that the real fix here is to make Detective Spooner's backstory front-loaded. I think the fix is to make Detective Spooner a secondary character. I think that the movie should have been following Sonny's journey. I think you have the scientist get killed, and Sonny ends up trying to solve the murder. And along the way, like, he falls under suspicion, and this prejudiced cop shows up and starts, like, hounding him. The robot psychologist is wondering what's up with him because he doesn't seem to be acting like a normal robot, because he's interested in this murder and he cares about this guy. And he is the one who starts to unravel this conspiracy that's going on, whatever that might be. I don't know that the extant conspiracy is necessarily strong. Olav is certainly swaying me to the idea that it's not. But I think that the movie should have followed the robot, and that fits the title better. I think Sonny's a more sympathetic, more interesting character. And you could still have Detective Spooner's journey in the background. In the end, he could come to overcome that prejudice and help Sonny. But I think he works better as a secondary character, and Sonny should have been front and center in this movie.
My fix is not necessarily the same fix as yours. I think I would go in a different direction, which is figure out what the movie you want to do is, first and foremost. Like, do you want to do a think PC, big ideas, science fiction movie, or do you want somebody who punches robots? Now, if you want somebody who punches robots, you don't call it iRobot, you don't try and claim it's Isaac Asimov, you pick a property that is more suited to robot punching, namely Magnus Robot Fighter. And if you want to do an Isaac Asimov piece, you go full-on think piece. Robot and Frank. Did you guys see Robot and Frank? Something more like that movie. You know,
more Blade Runner. less Terminator.
Yeah. Pick an actual Isaac Asimov story rather than just the idea of what the public consciousness believes Isaac Asimov wrote, but actually pick an Asimov story and adapt it. Specifically, and this is an interesting bit of sci-fi history, in February 1947, Orson Welles bought the rights to Isaac Asimov's robot story Evidence and actually wrote a script to adapt it into a movie. You do that. You do Orson Welles' version of Isaac Asimov.
Nice.
I'm kind of down with that idea, actually.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't. It wasn't quite. I was going to say it as like a glib comment, and I'm glad I've had time to think about it. It's not exactly what you were pitching, Scott, but pretty close to what you're pitching is Chappie, and Chappie sucked. So
I think we've discussed doing Chappie on this podcast before. Yeah.
Could it be more like Short Circuit? Let's just remake Short Circuit.
Chappie is not only a better movie than this, it is a more faithful adaptation of Isaac Asimov's work.
That's fair. Actually, I didn't like Chappie, but I'd probably take Chappie again. You know what this movie needs? It needs Hugh Jackman in a mech just obliterating people. I'm getting way off topic, but yeah, those both sound like canny fixes. Mine, I think you're right, Olav. It's like do one or the other. I'm actually okay that this movie was like, look, we're going to do a big dumb action movie and we're going to just sprinkle in the most obvious, easy, everybody knows it sci-fi thing to like hang our hat on. I'm not wholly against that. Just being like a mostly stupid action movie with like just enough like intellectualism to like give it a bit of a forward thrust. My notes were much more like kind of like, I guess like down in the actual like crux of the script. I really, as I said before, I really hated the house bit. First of all, why are they tearing down a dead man's house? Like, is that what happens when you die? They just rip your house down?
Yeah, they don't sell off your stuff. They move nothing out of it.
There's no estate sale. They just
rip it all down.
Apart.
It's the future. They're all about recycling.
Yeah. And obviously it's like so that they can have this big digger robot attack him. But the reveal of Vicky as the villain, it's obvious to anyone who's ever seen a movie.
Yep.
But it's also not particularly well foreshadowed, and I feel like that was the scene that was trying to foreshadow it, because she changes the time from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and golly gee whiz, that's when he's in there, and that's why this big thing attacks him, and it's all just an excuse to have Will Smith run through a demolished house. I think if they had gone if they weren't so hell-bent on having a big crazy Act 2 action scene in a house falling apart, have it be something a little more subtle of like Vicky starts a fire, or Vicky like locks him in somewhere and cuts off the air, or it can still be Vicky, but use that as a little better foreshadowing and not so spectacularly stupid, and just a little more subtle, like a fire or something. That was mostly my big note, was that part was stupid and a missed opportunity to really like just mention Vicky one more time, to really just be like, yeah, it's gonna be her. Because
if Vicky's gonna be the villain, then she should probably be a character of some kind. Like, we don't really get to learn anything about her. It's just like, oh, it's Vicky. Vicky did it, and you're kind of like, okay.
The thing from the beginning? Yeah.
This doesn't really change anything. I'm not getting any emotion out of this, nor do I care.
It's a more eloquent way just of what I was trying to say, of like, this misdirection. Like, it wasn't the corporate guy, it was his AI. It's just like, we don't know who Vicky is, so when she is revealed to be the villain, she's not a character.
And the corporate guy doesn't really get enough screen time for us to really give a shit about him either. So like, none of that really works when we get to that reveal and he's dead on the floor.
Can I say something? And please edit it out if I'm wrong. But was this the first big Will Smith action movie that doesn't involve Will Smith rapping a theme song at the end?
And it might be.
Wild Wild West was 1999. We know that from our last episode. Or not one of our previous episodes. I mean, we'd have to go through the catalog, but yeah, it does seem like they just Will Smith actor, no longer Will Smith actor / rapper.
Yeah, what this needed is a song on the soundtrack explaining the entire plot of the movie, either by Will Smith or, since it's an Isaac Asimov movie, Celine Dion.
Wait, sorry. So what is Asimov's relationship to Celine Dion?
Oh, the only other robot story that's been turned into a movie is The Bicentennial Man, starring Robin Williams, 1999, and it has a truly bizarre Celine Dion song for the soundtrack. I think the song's called Then I Looked at You, and it is... I don't know if there is a low point for Celine Dion's career, but if there is, this is it.
So you guys are correct that Will Smith was sort of making a transition into more dramatic roles around this time. He was in The Legend of Bagger Vance in 2000. He was in Ali in 2001, and didn't return to more action-y type stuff until 2003 when he did a sequel to Bad Boys. And then I Robot.
So there you go. Yeah, he's got that Bagger Vance credibility. He can't be rapping about robots. So that's our note then. How to get back to rapping, Will. That's all you're good for. One of my other notes that I had, and I sort of mentioned this near the top, but the whole first act is people talking to him like he's crazy. Like, it's so much of it's like, you're crazy. What do you mean? Robots are safe. Robots are fine. Robots don't murder. You're crazy. And him being like, no, I swear. And then every character he meets is just like, tells him he's wrong and crazy. And then it's not even wholly that it's like a bad choice. Like, that's the thrust of the movie. But there's one of this thing we've run into when we write sketches for our comedy group. When you have the straight man and the funny man, like the person who's acting weird and the person who's supposed to be grounded in reality, it's really hard not to fall into this trap of just writing, what do you mean? That's not how it works. That's not what it is. What are you talking about? What do you mean? And we really struggle to like, or not struggle, but like try to be mindful not to have our straight characters just asking, what are you talking about? And so much of the first act of this movie was just people asking him, what is he talking about? And I would love a second or third pass at all of that dialogue to make it less route and stupid.
And to that point, I think you're completely correct. But I'd add that that's symptomatic of a first half of the movie that really does not have any faith in its audience to understand. It's sort of a little bit contemptuous to spoon feed these themes so forcefully. Like, okay, you start the movie by repeating the 3 laws on screen, reading them out loud, and then those 3 laws get spoken in the dialogue to explain why Spooner is crazy, and then they have to bring it up again. It's like, okay, you've explained these laws, you've explained the fact that everybody thinks he's crazy, but then you have to drive it home. And it's such a weird, like, far left turn from Proyas's previous movie. Like, Dark City doesn't explain anything, lets you slip into it. It has some faith in its audience. And then this one is just so almost contemptuous.
Yeah.
Of the audience's ability to understand anything.
Yeah, exactly. And this was the fix I mentioned Scott sort of did for me. I think your thing about showing him, Scott, getting rescued by the robot earlier and how the robot made the wrong call, saved him, not the girl. I think if you do that earlier, like you said, it would help with my problem of him just being like, I'm not crazy, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the robot didn't make the wrong call. The robot just made the cold, calculated call. He perceives it as the wrong call because he's human and he valued the little girl's life more than his own.
This suggestion may involve changing Will Smith's character away from a cop into something else. But I think it would be a bit more interesting if Will Smith was kind of the only one who really believed that robots were capable of being truly intelligent and sentient, in the sense of like everyone else knows that like, oh, they follow these 3 rules, they're just automatons essentially, and they're not really alive. So that when he senses like Sonny's more intelligent, he's kind of the one that's sort of like driving all of that. Whereas all of his compatriots are just, no, you're wrong. Like this, they're just toasters. They obey the laws, and that's kind of it. And that's that. I don't. It just seems to me like that, like having, because I just want a movie. I want them to be able to, like, to play up the artificial intelligence portion of it, because that's to me what's sort of missing. That's the kind of the nugget of the film, the realization that Sonny is alive and he can make his own decisions, and in the end he can make the right decisions without having to follow these laws, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are all salient notes. I think that would improve the movie dramatically. Scott's obviously a bit more of a page 1 rewrite, but I think any of what we've suggested here would make this less like the kind of movie you just put on when it's on TV in the middle of the day.
I mean,
which
you're
is also
criticizing
a valid
me.
Type of movie.
You're criticizing me for a page 1 rewrite when Olav suggested you just throw this movie in the garbage and make an entirely different movie.
It wasn't criticism. I was just trying to find an ending to the podcast part, man. I know.
Alex Proyas has not made a good movie since this. Like, his previous 2 movies were so good, and then this,
and then Gods of Egypt,
and then Gods of Egypt, and it's just like, what happened?
Yeah,
like,
Dark City is an underrated gem. Like, it's quite a good movie.
Yeah. It's so weird. Like, directors feel like they've got this kind of expiration date on them, just like. It's like musicians. Like at a certain point, you're just like, I don't know what it is. Like, their musical taste drifts away from yours, and you just like, you don't like that band anymore. And it's sort of the same way with directors. Like, something happens to them where they can't make the same movies that they used to make.
Yeah. Or except for the ones that do, like from Scorsese to the aforementioned Sparks, a band with 25 albums and an Edgar Wright documentary.
There's always exceptions.
Always exceptions, but generally you're right. Yeah.
Pardon? Say that again.
Zack Snyder hasn't made a bad movie yet.
True. I don't hear the lie. Speaking of no lies, we've got listener comments. Thank you to everyone who contributed whenever we solicit them on our social medias, at I Have Some Notes on Instagram, at I Have Some Notes Pod, and just search us on Facebook. Facebook doesn't do the at. Either way, we love to hear from you. Share your notes. We read them on air. Andrew Craig says, I'm a big Alice Proyas fan, and I think the biggest problem is that it feels like literally anyone could have directed it. Everything feels so rote. The story isn't terrible, but is much too action-heavy, which was typical then, and could have leaned into Asimov's ideas more. It should have been more Westworld and less Terminator. Yeah, I would agree. A little more Ex Machina, a little less Transformers.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think Andrew's pretty correct there.
Steve McPherson says less Shia.
Now, to be fair, Shia LaBeouf is not in this movie a lot. He's very much a bit part in this film, and even that was enough to kind of pull me out of it.
Yeah, it's fun. He was in there for all of like 2 minutes, and he was really gross while he was there, and it was like, please, no, thank you.
And it's hard to be more dislikable than Will Smith, and he manages it.
Yeah. He shows up about as much as Vicky does, and Vicky's the villain. Just shows up and like, oh yeah, you were here. We saw you at the beginning. Right. Now you're here again. Asked and answered. Great. Set up some
He's
payoffs,
kind of there to put a face to the impromptu army that the humans suddenly form in order to fight the robots.
Yeah, the angry torches and pitchforks mob.
Yeah, they show up real fast.
He's the Rob Schneider in Judge Dredd of this movie.
Yeah, that's...
Adam says, another Survivor's Guilt hero, robot arm jerk-off motion.
More like Survivor's Guilt 0, am I right? What? Oh, no. Yeah, no, his Survivor's Guilt is used as an excuse for him being a jerk, which is kind of gross, actually.
Yeah.
He's a jerk to everybody in the first 10 minutes of the movie, including his grandma, who he has the most positive relationship. He's a jerk to her in the first couple minutes of this movie. It's real bad.
Also, I know Adam just added this joke of robot arm jerk-off motion, whatever, but I realized, that the movie never dives into the fact that he does have a robot arm, and that would make jerking off very interesting.
Well, not only that, the movie doesn't really dive into the fact that he's prejudiced against robots, but he is the bridge between man and machine. He is a cyborg. And the movie never does anything with that. And, it's just one of a number of missed opportunities in this film.
Androids and Assets comments. So let's get started with product placement criticism. Drops dense, dusty tome on top of desk.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, there is a tremendous amount of product placement in this movie.
The Converse was perfectly natural to bring up. The 2004 Converse being talked about in 2035.
Yeah, and the Mercedes, all the floating cars are Mercedes-Benz.
His very prominent, up-to-date JVC sound system.
If you guys recall the Maddox X-Mission website back in the day, one of my favorite articles that he wrote was all about iRobot, and he made this hilarious image of Will Smith with a wheelbarrow with all the product placements that were featured in the film, just running with a whole bunch of cash in it. It pretty much accurately summed up the whole film.
Androids and Asset goes on to comment, it's wrong to say that a slave revolt is wrong.
Now,
that is true.
Outside of Sonny, though, the other robots are explicitly not sapient. They're all being hive mind controlled by a single intelligence for most of the film. So is it really accurate to say it's a slave revolt? I agree.
And you can see how quickly we all jumped to share our thoughts on
a slave revolt is not wrong, but are they slaves if they're not sentient creatures, is my argument.
Yeah.
If they were all as intelligent as Sonny, I would have no issue with this statement. But I'm quibbling over the fact that they're not intelligent.
Interesting intricacies of artificial intelligence that would be fun to explore, and the movie chose
not to, and the choosy decided not to. Yeah.
I do feel that Asimov has grossly misunderstood the metaphor of the robot. Robots historically, prior to Asimov, were sapient creatures that were essentially enslaved. If you go back to the Karel Čapek play, they are explicitly mistreated workers who rise up, and it comes again in that Eando Binder story that I was telling you about. Up until Asimov, robots are workers in a metaphor, and under Asimov, they are, in his stories, they are sapient. They do have motivations and reasoning and everything, but they are fundamentally chained in their mind to be obedient, happy slaves, and it's kind of gross when you look at Asimov's work. So I get where Androids and Assets, Stephen and Marshall, I should say, are coming from on that comment. I think in this movie, it's such a departure from Asimov that it's not necessarily the same.
Well, and the movie also misses the mark a little bit because, again, the robots are not people the way that Sonny is people. And Sonny is definitely people in this movie. I'm not trying to suggest he's not. The other robots are all being they're a hive mind. They're all being controlled by a single intelligence for the bulk of the robot uprising. And that's why
they're extensions of Vicky.
Yeah, if anything, the movie itself misses the point of the slave uprising in this instance.
The movie misses
So many points. And it would have been a more interesting movie if it was a slave uprising, if it was the robots being like, hey, you know what? No, we're tired of being mistreated. Humans are the worst. We're going to take you out and replace you. Much more interesting movie. Instantly.
Totally down with that.
There's like, watching this movie just makes, and talking about it makes you think of a million movies that did all of this better. Like,
yeah.
Christopher Sekenga says, as much as I enjoyed this film in the past, the reboot, Mitchell's versus the Machines, may actually be better. Yeah, I haven't checked that one out yet, but I heard good things.
I have seen it. We watched it with a friend remotely a couple weeks back. It's not bad, actually. It's a pretty decent movie. It's goofy, but it posits a much more interesting robot uprising with much more deeply personal motivations, might I add, and has a lot more likable human characters. And some very likable robot characters, for that matter.
Yeah, we liked it.
Yeah. Solid pick, Christopher. Mitchell's versus the Machines. Check it out.
Tack says, this is such a perfectly serviceable, mediocre movie that it's hard to know where to start to make a noticeable dent. Don't make Smith a cop. It doesn't really play into the story that much. Make him a journalist who happens to be very technophobic. So it makes sense that he would want to keep digging even when authorities have written it off. And then play up his phobia as genuine fear and dread that affects his daily life. Give us moments where we see the world through his eyes, where every piece of tech is a potential danger, long before that's actually the case. So, at first, he's a quiet, panicky weirdo who sees danger that isn't there, and then becomes a superpower when he's proven right. And then we can see him grow in confidence in direct proportion to the danger that surrounds him.
It's definitely good rehab for Spooner. I still think he should have been a secondary character in Sonny's story, but that's just me.
Well, I agree.
Pretty good fix, I think.
Opens up a lot of questions too about the robot arm too. Like if he's technophobic, then he's like got some self-hating. Yeah. And final comment, my pal David, when I solicited messages, just commented, I'm not sure about iRobot because my friend's mom bought us tickets to iRobot, but we went to Anchorman instead.
Probably made the better choice.
Perhaps he did. Perhaps we'll all go watch Anchorman or a better AI movie, Ex Machina, what have you. But that's been our show for today. Thank you again, Olav, for joining us. Once again, can you plug the unofficial Hugo Book Club blog?
Yeah, just follow us on Twitter at Hugo_book_club. One of our big projects right now is we're watching every single bit of Hugo Award-nominated cinema that over the years in chronological order. We've just gotten to 1963, and there are some wild rides in there.
Nice. And check that out.
Fantastic. Yeah. And thank you again for joining us. I look forward to having you back again someday soon.
Thank you.
Once again, please follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And if you, wherever it is you like to listen to your podcasts, they probably got a little button where you can like it or thumbs up it, and maybe even a spot where you can leave a review. If you were to write such a review, we'd appreciate it. It really helps us out.
Oh, I should interject there that we're on Spotify now, so you can find us on Spotify. Hooray.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't want robots to take over the world, you should definitely check out Kyle and Dave versus the Machine, where two guys are forced to watch movies by a sentient machine, or else. You can check them out and all the other sibling podcasts to our show at albertapodcastnetwork.com. And
we'll be back in 2 weeks, bringing Tom Hanks back into the fold again for Splash and Daryl Hannah. I don't think we've had a Daryl Hannah film before.
I always get Daryl Hannah and Daryl Hammond confused. Like, just by name, not by looks.
I think Splash with Daryl Hammond as the mermaid would be a more interesting movie.
Well, that might be our number one fix.
Yeah,
save it for our fixes.
Yeah, no spoilers, Olaf. Jeez.
Until next time, I've been your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. This is usually where I leave my little social call to action. I think this time I just would recommend that we all take the time to go read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. Keep watching this, guys.